don't know. You're going to have to ask Aaliyah that question. I honestly, you just do your work. You got to do your work early and make it different. But Aaliyah did say I have a special whistle. And she shot 13 today.
She said that to you?
Yeah. Yeah. She said the last game I had a special whistle, which is cool.
Well, look at that. The justification started flowing quicker than bricks from the charity stripe. Aja Wilson and Becky Hammon, unable to accept a loss to the Indiana Fever, immediately turned their aim toward the officials. In their telling, the game was fixed and the referees were corrupt. Never mind Aaliyah Boston's command of the paint. Ignore Mitchell's scoring prowess. The referees were the deciding factor. At least, that's their story. So did the officials really hand Vegas the loss? Or was Indiana just the superior team? Let's be real for a second. Anyone who watched the game knows what actually happened. The Indiana Fever stood their ground against the reigning champions, the Las Vegas Aces, and decisively defeated them. They didn't just win by a hair or get bailed out by a last-second heave. They won with physicality, intensity, effort, and pure determination. Yet to hear Aja Wilson and Becky Hammon tell it, none of that was relevant. And this is where the irony becomes overwhelming. How rich, coming from Aja Wilson, a player who gets more calls than a telemarketer, the slightest contact near the basket, and she's awarded 2 shots. But the moment the calls don't favor her, she's screaming injustice. In every sense of the word, you can't invent this kind of hypocrisy. Let's get into the specifics. The Fever attempted 34 free throws, the Aces only 11. This is the statistic Becky Hammon presented at the podium as if it were undeniable proof, as if to say, look, we were robbed. We didn't actually lose. But let's get back to reality. Indiana earned every one of those attempts. Aaliyah Boston relentlessly forced her way into the paint on play after play. She attacked Aja's body, initiated contact, and compelled the officials to make the call. That is the definition of aggressive play. That is how you earn your trips to the line. And for the record, if you want to avoid a foul, maybe don't reach in and slap. But apparently, to Aja Wilson, Aaliyah Boston didn't just play hard. She got some kind of magical special whistle. Aja literally said after the game that Boston admitted she has one. Which, first of all, let's stop right there. That's not a real thing. Nobody gets handed a golden whistle that follows them around the league. Boston got calls because she attacked net, period. Meanwhile, Aja spent half her possessions taking fadeaway jumpers and mid-range shots. Newsflash, referees don't reward jump shots with free throws. And let's not forget, this is the same Aja Wilson who has spent years getting more free throws than half the league combined. The same Aja that Fever fans complain about constantly because she gets bailed out every time somebody breathes on her jersey. But now, suddenly, she's the victim? Come on, that's like the teacher's pet who's been getting free candy all semester crying because one day the teacher forgot to bring Skittles. Cry me a river. Now Becky Hammon wasn't any better. She walked into that press conference with the smugness turned all the way up and dropped her mic moment. They shot 34, we shot 11. Next question. That's it. That was her analysis. Forget strategy, forget adjustments. Forget that Boston and Mitchell outplayed her stars. Nah, it was the ref's fault. If that's the coaching philosophy, maybe the Aces need a new game plan. Because last time I checked...
The look on your face while you're looking at that box score, I'm wondering what's really standing out to you there.
I was just looking at the fouls. Like, Liz had 5, Jackie had 5, Chelsea had 5. And that's very interesting to me because I'm not saying we don't foul. Yeah, we foul here and there, but that's very interesting.
Asia, it looks like they really were intentional about going to Aaliyah in the second half. What was, I guess, difficult about containing her? I know you guys kind of touched on a few things, maybe with the foul calls, but what made it successful for them to keep running her tonight?
I don't know, you might have to Aaliyah that question. I honestly, you just do your work. You gotta do your work early and make it different. But Aaliyah did say I have a special whistle. She shot 13 today.
She said that to you?
Yeah. You? Yeah, she said the last game I had a special whistle, which is cool. So we just gotta play their better defense, make her look a little difficult, and kind of go from there.
River.
Megan had 4.
What? Oh my God, that's interesting. That's what I was looking at. We'll do better. We gotta play better defense.
By interesting, you mean that shit.
Yeah, I can't say that because I got brain protection. But
I'm saying I have no brain.
yeah, it's interesting. But we'll be better.
Coach, how much Liz foul trouble impacted you on the rotation and her impact on the defensive end?
Yeah, I mean, it hurts us. We need to be able to play Liz heavy minutes. She's been an impactful player in this series. I gotta go back and look at the tape, but it seemed like there was a lot of grabbing and holding down there. That got called one way.
Anything else?
I did appreciate it was a little tighter.
You name it, we've seen it. But in this case, the refs weren't the reason Vegas lost. They were bad both ways. As usual, the difference is Indiana didn't let it rattle them. They adjusted, stayed aggressive, and forced the issue. Vegas, on the other hand, folded and then cried foul. And here's a point nobody in Vegas wants to admit. Becky Hammon got outcoached. Stephanie White finally unleashed Boston in the post, told her to stop floating around the perimeter, and the results were devastating. Vegas had no counter. Becky didn't adjust. She didn't double Boston effectively, didn't rotate fast enough, and let her dominate one-on-one. That's not refs. That's coaching. But are we hearing Becky admit she got outcoached? Nope. Just excuses. So let's recap. A'ja Wilson blames a special whistle. Becky Hammon points at free throw numbers like they're a conspiracy chart. Aces fans scream about corruption, and meanwhile, the scoreboard says Indiana Fever won. Las Vegas. Aces in the excuse wars. The Fever earned their win. Vegas lost because they got outplayed. Simple as that. And here's the kicker. All this whining sets up Game 5 perfectly, because now the pressure is on Vegas. If they lose again, the narrative isn't just refs cheated us. The narrative becomes A'ja Wilson and Becky Hammon got outplayed and outcoached by a young Indiana team. That's the legacy risk here. And deep down, they know it. That's why the excuses are flowing like water. At the end of the day, fans don't care about referee conspiracies. They care about results, and the result right now is clear. The Fever are one win away from the finals, while the Aces are stuck pointing fingers. So here we are, Vegas crying about refs, Indiana celebrating, and the WNBA caught in the middle. The Fever didn't need special whistles. They needed Boston, Mitchell, and Sims. And they showed up. If the Aces want to survive, they better stop blaming refs. The wildest part, Becky actually tried to spin it like the game was called differently than the rest of the series. You don't say. Maybe because Indiana finally started pounding the paint instead of settling for jumpers. Maybe because Aaliyah Boston finally looked like the #1 pick she was supposed to be. Just a thought. And let's not act like Las Vegas was playing clean basketball. Jackie Young had 5 fouls. Chelsea Gray had 5 fouls. Liz Cambage, oh wait, she's not even in the league anymore. Scratch that. But you get the point. Vegas was hacking left and right and the refs called it. They didn't swallow the whistle. They didn't rig it. They just did their job. Meanwhile, Fever fans are laughing their heads off because for months they've had to listen to this narrative that Caitlin Clark is the only reason Indiana wins games. Well, guess what? Caitlin's been sidelined, and Aaliyah Boston has stepped right into that superstar role. She went toe-to-toe with A'ja Wilson and outplayed her. That's not rep. That's reality. Boston bullied her way to 24 points and 14 rebounds. That's called dominance, not favoritism. Kelsey Mitchell, she dropped 25, hit clutch shots, and outshined Jackie Young. Again, not refs, just buckets. Odyssey Sims, she cooked off the bench, crossing people out of their sneakers. Still not refs, just basketball. The Fever had a better game plan, executed better, and wanted it more. But no, according to A'ja and Becky, the script was written by corrupt officials. It's almost comical. The Aces lose, and suddenly the referees are crook. But when the Aces win off questionable calls in other series, not a peep. Silence. That's the hypocrisy here. Vegas has been benefiting from whistles for years. Becky Hammon herself has praised referees when the calls went her way. But the minute the scales tip in Indiana's favor, it's suddenly a conspiracy. Let's call it what it is. Deflection. The Aces don't want to admit that they got outworked. They don't want to admit that Aaliyah Boston punked their front court. They don't want to admit that Kelsey Mitchell cooked their guards. They don't want to admit that their bench gave them almost nothing. So instead of accountability, they point at the zebras and stripes and scream cheating. It's lazy. And honestly, it's embarrassing for a franchise that loves to brag about being the standard. But hey, this isn't new. Coaches blaming refs is older than basketball itself. It's the easiest scapegoat, because if you say we lost because they played better, that means you actually have to change something. If you say we lost because the refs were crooked, then boom, no adjustments needed. Just run it back and hope the whistle flips next game. It's excuse making. Now here's where it gets funny. Aces fans are buying into it. Twitter's been full of posts whining about how the league wants Caitlin Clark in the finals for ratings, as if referees are secretly on Adam Silver's payroll taking orders to rig games for Indiana. Give me a break. If the WNBA was actually rigging games, don't you think they'd prefer Vegas, the two-time champs with Aja Wilson, Chelsea Gray, and Jackie Young back in the finals? That's a safer bet for ratings than Indiana, who just climbed out of the basement last season. The conspiracy theory makes no sense. And let's not forget, this is Caitlin Clark's second year. She's not a rookie anymore. The narrative that the league is forcing her success is tired. She's proven herself. The Fever have proven themselves, and Aaliyah Boston just proved she's every bit the star Indiana drafted her to be. If the Aces can't handle that, that's their problem. Let's zoom in on that free throw stat one more time, because this is the hill Becky and Aja want to die on. Indiana 34, Vegas 11. Looks bad on paper, right? But dig deeper. Indiana attacked the rim relentlessly. Vegas settled for jumpers. That's the difference. That's not corruption. It's basketball 101. Aggression gets rewarded. Passive play doesn't. It's really that simple. And the funniest part, the Aces still had chances to win. Even with the free throw disparity, they were in striking distance late in the game, but they missed shots, turned the ball over, and folded down the stretch. That's on them, not the refs, not the league, them. So yeah, Aja Wilson and Becky Hammon destroyed the refs in their post-game rants. But the truth is, the only people they exposed were themselves. They exposed their own insecurity. They exposed their own lack of accountability. And they exposed how scared they are of the Indiana Fever. Because deep down, they know this isn't the same old Fever. This team isn't backing down anymore. Here's where we go even deeper. Because the meltdown from Vegas wasn't just a couple of salty quotes. It was a full-on attempt to rewrite what everyone actually saw. The box score doesn't lie. Aaliyah Boston owned the paint. Kelsey Mitchell owned the perimeter. Odyssey Sims torched their bench. And the Fever, a team that was supposed to be rebuilding, suddenly looks one win away from the finals. But Vegas, they want you to believe the refs cheated. Let's revisit Aja Wilson's comments, because they're almost comedy skits at this point. She said something like, "We foul sometimes." Sure, but the number of fouls called was interesting. Interesting, that's her word. Translation, we fouled a ton, but I don't like how obvious the refs made it look. Imagine being a superstar who gets bailed out by refs year after year, only to act shocked when the whistle doesn't come gift wrap. It's like a celebrity complaining that their free VIP pass didn't work at the club one night. Sorry, Aja, but regular rules apply sometimes. And let's really break down what happened defensively. Aja had no answer for Aaliyah Boston. Boston went right at her, right through her, and right over her. That's why she got fouled so much. Not because of favoritism, but because Aja couldn't keep her in front without slapping her arm or hip-checking her in the lane. That's not cheating, refs. That's called getting cooked. Then we've got Becky Hammon's press conference masterclass in deflection. She literally stared at reporters and said, "They shot 34 free throws. We shot 11. Next question. No mention of defensive adjustments. No mention of Boston's footwork. No mention of Kelsey Mitchell's shot making. No, just the refs. It's the easiest narrative in sports. When you lose, blame the people in stripes. But here's the problem. Everybody with eyes saw Vegas hacking away like they were chopping wood. The Aces weren't disciplined. They reached, they grabbed, they swiped down. Of course the whistle blew. It's not rocket science. It's what you get called. That's basketball. And the fact that Becky is so determined to pretend otherwise makes her look less like a Hall of Fame level coach and more like a PR manager for the Las Vegas excuse machine. And let's not pretend Vegas hasn't been favored in the past. Fever fans haven't forgotten the whistle in Game 3, when Caitlin Clark started 1 for 11 and still couldn't get a single call despite being hacked on drives. That game should have gone Indiana's way, but the refs swallowed their whistles, and Vegas stole one. It's funny how Becky and Aja had nothing to say about interesting officiating back then. It's only when the shoe's on the other foot that they suddenly find their voices. This is what makes the cheated narrative so laughable, because if the league really wanted to rig things, they wouldn't pick Indiana. They'd stick with the proven ratings monster, the Aces. Aja is a 2-time MVP. Becky is one of the faces of coaching, and Vegas has already built itself up as the WNBA's glamour franchise. If you were gonna fix a game for ratings, wouldn't you make sure Aja and crew advanced? The logic collapses on itself. Meanwhile, Indiana doesn't care about the whining. They're too busy celebrating. Aaliyah Boston's stat line: 24 points, 14 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 blocks, 2 steals, wasn't handed to her by refs. That was sweat and muscle. Kelsey Mitchell dropping 25 wasn't a gift from a whistle. That was skill. Odyssey Sims cooking defenders. One-on-one wasn't some referee conspiracy. That was basketball. Here's the truth. Vegas doesn't want to admit. Indiana beat them at their own game. The Fever were tougher. The Fever were hungrier. The Fever played like the team that wanted the finals more. And instead of tipping their hats, Vegas chose to cry foul. Literally. Now let's zoom out and talk big picture. This isn't just about one game. This is about a shift in power. For years, the WNBA has been dominated by the Aces. The Liberty, the Mercury, the usual suspects. Indiana was supposed to be rebuilding. A young team with promise but no chance of knocking off the Giants. But Caitlin Clark's arrival, paired with Aaliyah Boston's growth, changed everything. And now, in year 2 of Clark's career, Indiana is suddenly on the brink of the final. That's what really scares Vegas. Because let's be real, this isn't about refs. This is about ego. The Aces are used to being the bully. They're used to walking into gyms and owning the spotlight. But now they're watching the Fever steal the headline. Clark, even from the sidelines, is still the biggest name in the league. Boston is outshining Aja Wilson. Kelsey Mitchell is outdueling Jackie Young. The Fever are flipping the script, and the Aces don't like it one bit. And what happens when egos get bruised? Excuses, whining, conspiracies about corrupt officials. It's easier than admitting you got outplayed. The fans aren't buying it though. Social media blew up after the game. Fever fans clowned Ajaja for complaining about free throws when she's been gifted more whistles than anyone in the league. Neutral fans pointed out that Boston actually earned her calls by being aggressive, while Aja settled for jumpers. And even some Vegas fans admitted their team looked flat and deserved to lose. That's the thing about excuses. They sound good in the locker room, but they don't hold up under the bright lights of public opinion. Now, let's not let the referees completely off the hook. The WNBA's officiating has been trash all season long. Missed calls, inconsistent whistles, technicals for nothing. But look, this is nothing new. Coaches pointing fingers at refs is a tale as old as time. It's the simplest way out, because admitting we were outplayed forces you to look inward and make changes. But if you just say, the refs were against us, then presto, no need for adjustment. You can just try again next game and pray for a more favorable whistle. It's the first page of the excuse-making handbook. And now, the really amusing part, Aces fans are completely buying it. Social media is awash with complaints about how the league is rigging it for Caitlin Clark to get to the finals for TV ratings, as if the officials are getting direct orders from the commissioner's office to favor Indiana. What a joke. If the WNBA were in the business of fixing games, wouldn't they want their marquee team, the two-time defending champs with A'ja Wilson, Chelsea Gray, and Jackie Young back in the finals? That's a much surer bet for viewership than an Indiana team that was at the bottom of the league a year ago. The whole conspiracy falls apart under the slightest scrutiny. And let's remember, this is Caitlin Clark's sophomore season. She's established. This idea that the league is still manufacturing her success is just old. She has arrived. The Fever have arrived, and Aaliyah Boston just showed everyone she is the franchise cornerstone Indiana believed her to be. If the Aces have a problem with that, it's on them. Let's focus on that free throw differential again, since that's the hill Becky and A'ja are choosing to die on. Indiana 34, Vegas 11. It looks lopsided on the box score for sure. But look closer at the gameplay. Indiana drove to the basket with purpose. Vegas settled for outside shot. That's the story. That isn't a rigged game, it's a fundamental aspect of basketball. Attacking the paint is rewarded. Settling for jumpers is not. It's that basic. And you know what's craziest? The Aces still had their opportunities to win. Despite the free throw gap, it was a close game down the stretch. But they couldn't make shots. They committed turnovers, and they unraveled when it mattered. That's on them, not the officials, not the league. So yes, A'ja Wilson and Becky Hammon blasted the refs in their post-game interviews. But in reality, the only ones they truly exposed were themselves. They revealed their own fragility. They revealed their own refusal to take responsibility. And they revealed just how much they fear the Indiana Fever, because they know, deep down, that this is a different Fever team. This team doesn't roll over. Let's go one layer deeper. Because this meltdown from Vegas was more than just a few bitter sound bites. It was a concerted effort to distort what we all witnessed. The numbers don't deceive. Aaliyah Boston controlled the paint. Kelsey Mitchell commanded the perimeter. Odyssey Sims dismantled their second unit. And the Fever, a team still thought to be in its developmental phase, is now one victory away from the finals. And Vegas, their response is to claim the game was stolen. Let's re-examine A'ja Wilson's remarks, because they border on theatrical. She said something to the effect of, "We foul, I get it." But the quantity of fouls was interesting. Interesting. That was the word she used. What that really means is, we committed a ton of fouls, but I'm upset the referees actually called all of them. Can you fathom being a superstar who has been coddled by officials for years, only to feign outrage when the calls finally even out for one night? It's like a Hollywood A-lister complaining that they had to wait in line at the DMV. Welcome to the real world, A'ja. The same rules apply to everyone, and let's be crystal clear about the defensive matchup. A'ja was completely ineffective against Aaliyah Boston. Absolutely no answer. Boston went at her, around her, and over her. That's the reason she drew so many fouls. It wasn't because the refs favored her. It was because A'ja couldn't guard her without grabbing her arm or bodying her in the lane. That isn't a crooked official. That's simply being outplayed. Then you have Becky Hammon's masterclass in deflection at the press conference. She just stared dead-eyed at the media and said, "They shot 34 free throws. We shot 11. Next question." No acknowledgement of her team's defensive lapses. No credit for Boston's skill. No mention of Kelsey Mitchell's clutch shooting. None of that. Just blame the refs. It's the oldest trick in the book. When you get beat, point at the stripes. But there's a problem. Anyone with a working set of eyes saw Vegas hacking and reaching like they were in a street fight. The Aces played without discipline. They were handsy. They grabbed jerseys. They swiped at the ball. So, of course, fouls were called. It's not advanced calculus. That's the game. And the fact that Becky is so insistent on ignoring this reality makes her look less like a legendary coach and more like the head of PR for the Las Vegas grievance department. And don't for a second think Vegas hasn't been the beneficiary of favorable whistles. Fever fans certainly remember the officiating in Game 3, where Caitlin Clark went 1 for 11 and couldn't buy a call despite getting hammered on her drives to the rim. By all accounts, that was a game Indiana should have won, but the officials kept their whistles quiet, and Vegas escaped with a victory. Funny how neither Becky nor Ja had any comments about interesting officiating that night. It's only an issue when the calls go against them that they suddenly find their moral compass. This is precisely why the "they were robbed" narrative is so transparently false. If the league was truly trying to manipulate outcomes, Indiana wouldn't be their chosen team. They would back the proven commodity, the Aces. A'ja is a two-time MVP, Becky is a coaching icon, and the Vegas franchise has been carefully cultivated as the WNBA's premier market. If your goal was to fix a game to maximize ratings, wouldn't you ensure that A'ja's team advanced? The entire argument is self-defeating. Meanwhile, Indiana couldn't care less about the complaining. They are too busy savoring the win. Aaliyah Boston's incredible stat line, 24 points, 14 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 blocks, 2 steals, wasn't manufactured by the refs. That was the product of hard work and talent. Kelsey Mitchell hitting for 25 points wasn't a gift from the officials. That was pure skill. Odyssey Sims schooling defenders one-on-one wasn't part of some grand conspiracy. That was simply basketball. Let's face the truth that Vegas wants to avoid. Indiana beat them by playing their style of game, only better. The Fever were more physical. The Fever were more determined. The Fever played with the desperation of a team that truly wanted to reach the final, and rather than offer congratulations, Vegas decided to whine. Now let's look at the bigger picture here. This is more than just a single game. This signals a potential power shift in the league. For the last several years, the WNBA has been run by the same power brokers, the Aces, the Liberty, and a few other established teams. Indiana was meant to be a project, a young squad with a bright future, but not yet ready to challenge the league's elite. But the arrival of Caitlin Clark, combined with Aaliyah Boston's development, accelerated that timeline. Now, just in Clark's second season, Indiana is knocking on the door of the WNBA Finals. That is what truly terrifies Las Vegas. Because let's be honest, this has nothing to do with referees. This is about pride. The Aces are accustomed to being the top dog. They are used to entering any arena and being the main event. But that's changing. Now they have to watch the Fever dominate the sports news cycle. Clark, even while injured, remains the biggest star in women's basketball. Boston is outplaying A'ja Wilson. Kelsey Mitchell is winning her matchup against Jackie Young. The Fever are rewriting the league's hierarchy, and the Aces are not taking it well. And what is the natural response when an ego is wounded? You make excuses. You whine. You invent stories about biased officiating. It is far easier than admitting you were simply beaten. The fans, for the most part, see right through it. Social media was on fire after the game. Fever fans roasted A'ja for complaining about a lack of calls when she has been the beneficiary of more whistles than almost anyone. Neutral observers correctly pointed out that Boston earned her free throws with aggressive play, whereas A'ja was content to settle for jumpers. Even some Vegas supporters conceded that their team played poorly and got what they deserved. That's the problem with making excuses. They may offer temporary comfort in your own locker room, but they rarely stand up to public scrutiny. Now, this isn't to say the referees are perfect. Far from it. The officiating in the WNBA has been subpar all season. There have been blown calls, inconsistent standards, and questionable technical fouls in nearly every game. We've all seen it, but in this specific contest, the refs were not the reason the Aces lost. They were flawed for both teams, as they often are. The key difference was that Indiana played through it. They maintained their composure, stayed on the attack, and dictated the terms of engagement. Vegas, by contrast, fell apart and then pointed fingers. And here is the inconvenient truth that nobody in the Aces organization wants to acknowledge. Becky Hammon was outcoached. Stephanie White made a brilliant adjustment to feature Boston in the post, telling her to abandon the perimeter and dominate inside, and the strategy worked to perfection. Vegas had no answer. Becky failed to adapt. She didn't send effective double teams. Her team's rotations were slow, and she allowed Boston to win her one-on-one matchup repeatedly. That isn't about the refs. That is about coaching. But are you hearing Becky take responsibility for being out-schemed? Of course not. It's just more excuse though. To summarize, A'ja Wilson is blaming a non-existent special whistle. Becky Hammon is pointing to the free throw disparity as if it's a piece of evidence in a criminal trial. Aces fans are crying foul and claiming a conspiracy. And all the while, the final score shows an Indiana Fever victory. In the battle of excuses, Las Vegas is coming up empty. The Fever deserved their win. Vegas lost because they were beaten. It is as simple as that. And here's the final twist. All this complaining has raised the stakes for Game 5 immensely, because all the pressure is now squarely on Vegas. If they lose again, the story won't be, the refs robbed us. The story will be that A'ja Wilson and Becky Hammon were thoroughly outplayed and outcoached by a younger, hungrier Indiana team. That is the reputational risk they are facing, and you can bet they know it. That is why the excuses are coming so fast and furious. At the end of it all, fans aren't interested in referee conspiracy theories. They are interested in who wins. And right now, the reality is undeniable. The Fever are one game away from the finals, and the Aces are busy trying to find someone else to blame. So, there you have it. Vegas is complaining, Indiana is celebrating, and the WNBA is in the crossfire. The Fever didn't win because of special treatment. They won because of Boston, Mitchell, and Sims. And those players deliver. If the Aces hope to stay alive, they need to stop complaining about the officials and start playing better basketball. Let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more analysis.